Hello. The mic is working. Okay, cool. Welcome to the session. Yes, you can work on Rails and ARDN. Let's make this RailsConf last. Hi, I'm Kasper. You can find everything about me on this web address. I specialize in domain modeling and sort of training beyond the usual, which is where some of this comes from. We'll talk about today. In this talk, we'll cover how I build skills and you can too. We'll be focusing on the long term, so we won't cover mechanics of contributing. Yasu, who's sitting here, you have a talk on Thursday that's covering it, right? Perfect. I thought so. And after this talk, I hope you'll have more confidence to explore, working and figuring things out. And we'll hopefully give you some tips to sort of bump your information throughput by 20%. But let's do some table setting. First of all, the way I like to think of it, to me, code is just encoded communication. It's the communication you have with yourself, your past experience, where you'd like to go when you're incorporating things like this, like a talk or a blog post, talking with customers and so forth. But what I've also experienced is that really good stuff happens in communication. And to be able to have that good stuff happen, we need more overhead and capacity to see trade-offs and be able to weigh them and talk about them and figure things out. But if we're too fixed on code, we'll never get there. In other words, if we're stuck on mechanics, we'll miss out. So I like to compare this to speaking a language, where there's a difference between knowing words and being a speaker or a reader. But I also think there's another part we miss here, which is that programming languages are also just languages. I think we keep over-indexing on the programming part and getting things correct, which we definitely need. But in turn, we neglect this language focus where programming languages also have grammar and vocabulary. And Ruby keeps seeing upgrades to its grammar, like pattern matching or additions to the vocabulary with new methods or classes like data. So in my opinion, in order to grow, your process must focus on incorporating this grammar and vocabulary so you can build that bridge between what you know now and what you're working on knowing next, essentially. In other words, you want to improve your technical literacy to then increase your own impact. And then you're looking to do enough of this that you sort of achieve escape velocity where you then more become a speaker, if we're borrowing the language analogy. So here's how I can help you. I've done a lot of experience with this. I've been in and around and ahead of Rails in ways. These days, I'm the number 14 contributor to Rails. It's been a while. I was on a core team for -6 years. You can do the math, it checks out. I got this number of commits, yada, yada. Lots of pull request reviews, and I've also screwed a ton up doing this too. I've written code that could have been clearer, and I've sent messages that could have been kinder to contributors, even under the pressure to try to move things forward, and a pretty big issue backlog. Around Rails, I've done a bunch of work on a sorted number of gems. I'm still a number contributor to a bunch of these, even though I haven't touched them in years, which I think is kind of interesting. I've also done some of my own things where I'm trying to take things a little bit further or explore new ideas. Probably the one I'm going to look at is Oaken, which is sort of my revision of fixtures and factories and seeds as sort of one unit to make your opco graph more visible and make it easier to sort of generate a stable data set to drive over time. Thomas says, do you want to, yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. What drives me to looking at these things is essentially coming up with an idea, sketching it out, and seeing if it works. It becomes the fun of expanding what's out there. Because the way I see it, if there's a gem that's out there, then great, it's already out there. But what else can we do? And these tools can then also serve as inspiration for other people to then try their idea and spark something for them. The way I see it is essentially the joy of using a language and then seeing where it takes you and being in a conversation. So this is what this talk is going to be about today. It's essentially going to be my integrator approach for upskilling while working to do this kind of stuff over time. The result is we won't really work that differently. We just work in a way that sets us up for the future. And this involves a bunch of bite-sized learning. These 4 components where it's knowing your tools, parsing code faster, using network effects, and then these compound exercises. In real life, these 4 work in tandem and blur together a bit. That's kind of part of the point. And also, I find this is genuinely fun to work this way, at least for me, so, but okay, we'll get into it in a little bit. So first up, it's knowing the tools, and I think we're gonna have to acknowledge the most important tool in the room, and that's you. Because when I look out this room, I see some pretty giant tools. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Second of all, I pretty much always have a console open, whether or not it's just a plain IRB or a Rails console to muck with things and play around with stuff and sort of get a feel for them. And then I like to supplement that with looking things up in the index. You got rubyapi.org. I know there's more work done on the official docs. I still end up using this for right now. Or the Rails documentation for all the APIs on there. And that's for when you encounter a new word, you want to go either look it up there or maybe play around with the console first or back and forth. The point you want to get to here is you want to get better at looking things up and then skimming the docs. You don't have to understand all of it, but over time you'll get more efficient at this. You look things up faster and understand them faster, but you also end up with a larger vocabulary where you don't always have to look stuff up. And I find that this makes me really efficient in terms of coming up with things and figuring out what I want to do and play around with alternatives as well, because it's less draining to do so. Okay. Further on, if you want to get into the code, I use bundle open all the time. It'll open up the gem you've got installed locally. So if you're on Rails 6.1 and here you do bundle open active record, it'll be 6.1 versus 8.0, for instance. And then while you're in there, you could drop debugger lines or put statements. I tend to just use P because you get the expect output and it's like 1 character instead of 4. And if you forgot where you put all those, you can do bundle pristine to get back to the start. I also use method a bunch in the console or in the code where you could do user.method has many, you get a source location, and then in my editor, I can command click and I'll be taken right to where that source is. Sometimes there's a method that's overridden a bunch, so, and stay with this, the method returns a method object that you can call further methods on. Everybody with me? Okay, cool. And that's what happens in number 2 here, where we're calling, passing and render, getting a method object back. I think it's called an unbound method, I don't remember. But then if it's overridden because of the way Ruby works with modules and prepended modules and yada yada, you can then do super method to get the next one, and then super method to get the next layer, and then until you return nil essentially. So you could basically get source locations for each of those and then click through and see how it's dynamically put together at runtime essentially. Sometimes you'll also encounter methods where if you call source location on it, it'll return nil. That's actually a sign that it's written in C, so it's not written in Ruby. Just so you don't get confused, it just returns nil, or what is that? Half the battle, in many ways, is knowing where to look and then figuring out how to use it. That's sort of the point of this section. Second up is parsing codes faster. For me, the way I like to think of it is it's not so much reading, it's engaging with it. You want to be exposed to new code, essentially. You want to get comfortable sort of blasting yourself with new source files and then not feel overwhelmed. Can you have the file on screen and have it just be there and not feel, scared of it or whatever? Sometimes that happens. Sort of like, this seems really overwhelming. The other way I like to think of it is, I think sometimes people don't do this because they think it's about retention, as in holding on to things for dear life. But that's not really the way I like to do it. To me, memory is more about recall, where you actually want to catch and release over and over. You don't want to try to hold on to anything. You'll come back over time, because over time, what you want to do is build familiarity with the stuff you see. So when you see that method or class again elsewhere, you know it. And this is where it comes into using something like the console again to really settle it in. And with language, we know this. We know there's different levels of knowing, that there's partial understanding, and we can progressively understand more. It's not a binary where it's like you know all of it or none of it. I think what you want to focus on too, to gain experience, is to be more active as opposed to passive. It is not just reading, it is engaging with it. Only looking at words won't get you there. You want to work on internalizing what you see, so you can be an active participant and make your own choices. And also acknowledge that sometimes internalizing can feel more vulnerable, because you make your own choices, then you're on the hook for it. You'll be more exposed because you're making the choice to care. But I also say, I don't really see a way out of this, so I recommend just taking ownership of it, partly because the rewards are worth the risks, but also, well, again, I don't see a different way of doing it if you want to be good at stuff. The third tier is then using network effects. It's where you learn new things through contrast with what you know. So recently I was walking someone through this. They had never seen, they've seen an enum before and using a %i to generate a symbol array. But they hadn't seen index bind, they hadn't seen itself. So they were like, what does itself do? So I wanted to walk them through the process I do to learn things. Itself is quite simple, but I still want to show you what the process looked like when I walked them through it. So the first thing I do, I just want to run it in the console, literally just to see what happens. Find some object we can call the method on and see basically what happens. And in this case, we return the same thing, seemingly. Then I want to vary the input, or in this case, the receiver. This is the same for a hash, this is the same for an array. Can we call it a nil, for instance? And keep playing around with that and generate more ideas for what else I want to see this thing. Does it change somehow? And then I like to use something else I know. So for instance, if I know what object ID is, where we'll return the same integer if it is the same object in memory, here we can see that it actually is, because itself returns the object itself. We'll get to that. And then I also like to keep going. When we're doing this live with the person, I also thought about, well, what if we contrast it with dub, which is just short for duplicate, and seeing how it actually seemingly looks like it's returning the same thing, where it's also returning just the same string yo there. But then if you look at object ID, suddenly it's returning a different number because it's returning, making a new copy every time. So it's not the same instance in memory. It's slightly different there. So for me, what you want to do is compare and contrast to make things more vivid. You're trying to use one thing you know in that kind of network to then I have it here. God, I help myself. To what you know helps you poke and prod the next thing from different angles. And this is where staying scrappy really helps. You want to come up with new ideas for poking something to make it settle and solidify your own knowledge of how something works. And then we're getting back to, this is where it comes back into then knowing your tools, playing around with a console, maybe look at your documentation and using both of those to really settle it in. Then later on, that'll then help you parse the code faster because you recognize how it works by looking at it. Again, like the developer I was walking through where they hadn't seen index by or itself and used in that way, it becomes clearer over time. Really what you want to focus on is not so much how you currently navigate, but it's growing that extra witness capacity to see what else could I do? How else could I navigate this? What else could I try? What else would help me? And then the fourth tier is really these compound exercises. This was a term I learned recently from following Casey Johnson, who, I don't know if anybody knows Casey, writes about lifting weights and why you should get into it. He's got a great blog and this program called Liftoff, which is where I learned the term. But basically the idea is that these exercises give you greater gains in shorter time, again in sort of a weightlifting scenario. Example is squats, where you're combining 4 or 5 different muscle groups, but then you also get some extra benefits out of this combination, where you have to it helps your coordination and your balance, something you wouldn't get if you just made a really simple isolated exercise. Yeah, the fact that you had to coordinate all these things together at once improves you faster. So I think in programming you want something similar. You want to blend things to get extra benefits. And to me, this is all about exposure to open source, where each new thing you encounter out there can become a springboard where you can go through this process, again, see it on the screen, figure out how to run it locally, grab pieces of it to explore, and then look it up in the index as well to help facilitate that more. Over time, they'll become more familiar, so it'll parse that code faster when you see it again, and you can use that, learning that one thing then becomes part of this network. You can use it to learn other things faster. And then another thing for this that's kind of weird is I think you want to use rabbit holes when you're exploring open source code. I think people get scared of this because it's like, how do you navigate this stuff? It gets really overwhelming. But to me, that's the whole point of this compounding exercise. You want to do this because it'll train your discernment. You'll ask questions like, is this the right place? Do I need to go somewhere else? Do I have too many things going on? Am I too deep? Do I need to go further, actually? And what else do I need? You will start learning how to figure out where to go, essentially. That balance over time, which you wouldn't get if it's very simple. And what you're looking for is progress, not exhaustion. Again, it's not a binary, again, like language, but a gradual understanding you can improve over time. So if you only got 5% this time, that's cool. You can come back later and get another 5% or 10%, whatever it is. This is the same as language acquisition. Take the longer term view. It'll take time, and that's good. Also take breaks, but then keep going. And then we'll encounter this, what has happened to me before. I like to call it hitting bedrock. If you use one of these rabbit holes and go in it long enough, tracing through, at some point you'll hit bedrock, which is going to feel really good. It might be a method that's just like returning a true or false, where you literally can't go any further. And then what happens is you'll start going back up again. And to me, at least, it feels like a real accomplishment. And also just feels really good to start collapsing those things. Oh, I now know that I can't go further in this thing. And hitting these points also becomes kind of a turning point where if you then try the next rabbit hole, you can actually shorten it because you've gone through that process. So a case that happened not too long ago, I was walking someone through how action control loads helpers. And we encountered this line that said helpers for modification, .module eval. And basically what it's showing, well, if you already know what module eval is, you don't have to go any further. You could stop it right here. And not only that, it will also give you clues for what helpers for modification returns. Of course, this is Ruby. It could return anything if you override it or whatever, but it might be a clue for what helpers for modification is, which is a module. So the whole point of all this bite-sized learning is that eventually it will become intuition. Intuition can bring you a lot of speed where you traverse and know things using a lot less energy. And it just goes back to this focus on grammar and vocabulary. You will suddenly have that capacity and overhead, same as when speaking a language. It becomes easier to generate sentences or entire paragraphs or, oh, I can see the story now, as opposed to just being stuck in the mechanics. But for this to work, you need to focus your accuracy. You need to get in there. Otherwise, it won't be reliable, and you won't trust it, and you can't get those speed benefits. What you want to do is develop context over time. All this stuff is figuring out how things fit together. Where would I use this? Where would I not use this? And it takes a while to do. But I also want to let you know that all the people you see who do the things you want to do, it is not so much smarts, it's context. I built that context for myself with this integrator approach. So those things I want to do are way more in reach, again, over time. And it'll take time, keep going. I think we're actually going to do a live demo in a little bit, but just, again, here's where I'm at. You can find all my links here if you want to, blog posts, that kind of stuff. I focus on domain modeling and training beyond the usual. So for the last RailsConf, what I want to do is I want to put all this stuff together. So I want to try to see if we can explain something in Rails. You shout it out. Don't shout out actor record or something like that. Make it a little bit smaller. You can think about it a little bit. How much time do we have? Oh, we got plenty of time. Cool. Accent text, okay. I think it might be a little bit too big. If someone else has something else, let's try that. I might still go for it. Sorry, what did you say? Metaprogramming. I would like something in Rails. We could try metaprogramming too. Sorry, what? Class eval. Let's pick something in Rails. Initializers, okay. Do you, yeah, Shelby, are you happy with that? Cool. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, so what do? I need to switch the display in. I know how to do it. Mirror. That works, cool. And now we've got, oh, and now it's very tiny. Okay. Let's see. How's the font size looking up for you? This looks good here. I think this is better. Okay, so let's see. So basically, if we start here, I got plenty of time. Okay. So we got a little more time, so let's go a little bit through this. Rails is technically just a meta gem. There isn't really anything in it. Load the gem spec, please. It's coming, there it is. It's just a dependency for all these different dependencies. What you know as Rails actually happens in rail ties, where everything is sort of tied together. So let's go looking at that. It's here. And font size okay, right? Let's see. Okay, bigger, 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 bigger. Okay. Okay, was it here? Okay, cool. So let's see, we're looking for initializers. So I think where we want to start is actually, what if we just do a little bit of trip to, if we go into the, so rail size is then just a separate gem, which is also where the generators are. And I'm just traversing through the standard gem structure. It has a lib folder, and it has a Rails folder here, where it's a bunch of stuff. Here's the generators, by the way. Let's see. I think I just want to start with showing you the application itself. We're moving towards it in a bit. So speaking of, here's the initialization parts of it. This is the stuff that will show up on the API side. So if you look up, oh, let's see if I can type it here. Oh, I got it. Yes, this is the same, see, initialization, Rails application, and it's here. So the documentation here is what ends up under the API side, unless it's marked as no doc. We'll probably see that in a bit. The application inherits from engine, and then we can click here, see engine. And Rails uses a bunch of engines internally, action cable. Matthias, you're asking action text, here it is, the engine for that. Let's see, where's it defined? Here, jumping into engine, and then engine inherits for, no, this is different. Oh, is that new? I don't think I've seen this before. Okay, where was I? Scrolling. This is what I mean with navigating a bit. Let's see, this is like, there we go, in engine RB. So then engine inherits from this thing called rail ties, and now we can jump into this. And then there's also a bunch of rail ties in Rails. The difference between a rail tie and an engine is that engines can also have like an app folder where you can include your own controllers and views, and it'll just be in your Rails app. Caveat here, because there's some more configuration. Let's see, where is the one I want? Not this one, not this one. Is it here? No, it's not this one. Where's the one I want? Any rail tie. That's that configuration? Configurable? Let's open this up. Splitting these two. This is not the one I want. This is also not the one I want. Where's the definer? Okay, we'll just skip it then. I want to make it like this. There we go. Let's see. Here we go. Here's more about the initializers. So there's an initializer method. So what we could do is head over here and see that. Initializer. Will it load? Oh, dockside. Oh, okay. Nice. Well, okay, not doing that then. So I'm thinking of the initializers like here, where there's this block that you can pass a, I should probably mark it here. You can see the cursor, right? Yeah, it's there, okay. Where you pass it a string, and then you can run a block to it, and the initializers that you put in config initializers sort of work the same way, I think. Right, China? Who's not? Okay, cool. Let's see, plenty of time, cool. We'll just keep finding them. Let's see, where's that at? Is that in here or is it a module? Let's see if we can find this command F in here. Initializer. It's in here, do def. Not in here, okay. I think it's in a module. So this is where I've been here a little bit before. Yeah, that's the one. Click on that. I think we want this one. Cool. Now we're talking about a little bit of meta programming here. There's a hook on modules that you can override. It's called included, where then you can do further extensions. It's pretty common. So if you've ever seen Access Support Concern, this is kind of what it does in part. And here we got a whole bunch of the context. This is slightly complex. There's a collection here. We're doing something with tsort, which is topological sorting. That's kind of complex. There's a whole bunch of things here. We're appending here. Shovel operator, running the initializers. So we can grab all of them, sort them, and then run them passing all the arguments if it belongs to the specific group. Okay, that seems to make sense to me so far. Class methods, initializers chain. Okay, so we're taking all these collections and gathering them together from, I guess, what is it? Ancestors, okay. And I can't remember if ancestors is something in here or if it's in Ruby. Nothing in here, okay, let's see if we can do that. Is it in here? Module ancestors, there you go. Find it there. Okay, and then please. I'm doing a live demo, please. Okay. No, there it is. Returns list of modules included, prepended in mod, including mod itself. Okay, all these ancestors. Do you want to see if we can actually show that? I cannot do that here. I have it on the other screen. Here we go, okay. So what if we do, here's me working out some of the other demo stuff you saw earlier. So what I want to do is, I'm just curious to see, does module ancestors actually work here? Does module have ancestors? Anchovy is cool. Oh, it does. Interesting. So what if we do our own class? Just do like this. Hello. Okay, and now we're our own ancestor too, and then we got object. We're not, module is not in it. Interesting. I'm just comparing the two. Let's see, anything else we want to do? What if we do class? I use yo and hello all the time for these kind of things. Let's see, what have to do this? Ancestors here? Okay, so we're again embedded in there. We got hello to superclass, then we got object and all these different, I guess they're included in there. What if we do included modules? I just thought of that to see what else. Okay, so these are included modules. That explains what's in here. So now we know roughly what the difference is, except for basic object, which then is an object. But the rest are in here, right? Yeah, it's the same. PP object makes sense. That's probably from IRB. JSON X generator, the internet is object, brewer, and kernel. Yeah. Cool. Cool, cool. Okay, and now I've got to figure out my own rabbit hole because I forgot where we're at. Ancestors, here's where we came from. So we're looping through. We get our own classes included as an array, and then we're reversing them. So I guess we're pulling it from the subclasses first and then up, or superclass and then down. I think that's how it works. Okay, and here's then the definition for that initializer you saw in the documentation, not here, elsewhere. Arrays, putting in the after, appending it, grabbing, making like a internal object here. This initializer, it has some attributes, some context as well, belongs to this whole group thing. And there's an instance exec, so we're doing a little bit more meta programming. I think the context here is like the Rails application instance. I think that's what it is. Let's see, oh, still got time. I wonder if do we want to see, what if we figure out, what if I configure initializers? Can you see that? How do we find that? That's the dummy applications, that's not what we want. How do I find that? If we do this. I think it's going to be in, where's pass.rb? So do we have it in here? That's not the one. Okay. So I'm going back through some of the stuff I remember. There's some load pass, ev load pass. I want to see if I can find a place where we're actually loading the directory config initializers, but I don't think it's in here. So Rails internally maintains this pass object with a bunch of paths in there. This is how it figures out. You saw it up top in the documentation. Let's scroll back up. Where you can have these like root paths and some custom directories. You can then get them expanded, so all the files that are in there, and then only the files that exist within there. So like globbing, essentially. Cool. I'm a little bit lost now. So what do I want to do? Only 0 on the direction 16 Rails default load pass. That's not what I want. How do I find a config? Oh, and the reason I'm doing this on github.com is just to not feel like you need to have a checkout locally or let that stop you or whatever. It's not too bad to navigate here. Initializers, but this is probably the time where I would do it. I can't spell anymore. Can you find it like this? There's really nothing there. There's something in there. That's the generators. That's cool. That's cool. Not what I want. Not what I want. Figuring. Multi-DB generator. Generators actions. Interesting. It's not quite what we want. Cool. So I think if we actually go back to this is not working anymore. Got like 3 minutes left. Okay. I should probably start wrapping up. Let's see if we can define one more. Do this. I forgot what I was looking for. Run load hooks. That's almost it. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to find that. Cool. But yeah, this is kind of what it looks like. You just keep going at it, keep trying new things, come up with different ideas for exploring it. You can keep using the reference, pull out our console to double check how it works and get a feel for it. I haven't run module ancestors before, so it's new to me that the class itself was in there. Where is it, all these tabs here? Here it is. That yo was in itself in ancestors here. I hadn't seen it before, so that's kind of interesting to just play around with it. Yeah. I guess so. I'm not quite sure if you're basically saying that maybe ancestors is a version of prepended modules. Is that not there? Prepended. I spelled it right. I can't hear you. What do you say? Yeah, let's try it. So this is, we can do it this way. Just hacking it in there, cool. But is this not the way you do it? How do you get the? Is it just ancestors here? Well, it's in there, okay. Right. I can just repeat because I have the mic. You're saying that because we now prepended a module, ancestors is also that includes, that has the list of prepended modules, then our class itself, it'll basically show you how method resolution works for this class. We'll go to that custom module first, then we'll hit ourself, then we'll hit our superclass hello, then we'll hit object, then we'll hit all these different modules that are included somewhere else. Cool, I have a minute left, so this is kind of it. Cool, thanks.